Oh, I did that wrong. Sorry. Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on MOOCs, Massive Open Online Courses. Excuse me, I'm seeming to have a little problem here with my, I've lost my my slide. It'll just take me 1 second and I will get it back here. I believe I will just start talking. Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on MOOCs, Massive Online Open Courses. Today's session is the first of a second ALCTS series on the topic of libraries and online learning. This series is designed to promote effective participation by librarians in the online learning environment and specifically to provide background knowledge for librarians in ALCTS specialties to lead in this endeavor. Today's presentation is MOOCs and the Public Library and Opportunity. We're delighted to have Dorothy Pawlowski, Head of Adult Services at Ridgefield Library, Ridgefield, Connecticut, as our presenter. Dorothy has had varied career experience in publishing and marketing, in physical therapy, and since 1992 in librarianship. As Head of Adult Services at Ridgefield, Dorothy coordinates collection development, runs technology programs for library patrons, and provides readers guidance through websites, flyers, and blogs, among other traditional and innovative methods. Among her recent accomplishments was a successful 10-week MOOC, which was centerpiece of Ridgefield's Adult Summer Reading Program in 2013. Today, Dorothy will discuss how public libraries and librarians can use MOOCs to promote lifelong learning in their communities. This webinar will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to each attendee shortly after the conclusion of the program. We'll pause at the end for questions, and possibly during the presentation as well at Dorothy's discretion. Please type your questions in the question box that appears on your screen. If there are more questions than time, Dorothy has graciously agreed to answer any questions that could not be answered during the session later. Again, my apologies for not getting my slide up there quickly. And now, as I turn the podium over to Dorothy, there may be a short delay.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me, and thank you to ALEC for inviting me to be part of the series. I'm going to talk about my experiences in becoming a meetup for a Coursera MOOC entitled The Fiction of Relationship, taught by Professor Arnold Weinstein from Brown University, and this became the focal point of our 2013 Adult Summer Reading Program. After offering this MOOC at our library, I'm convinced that public libraries are a perfect match for MOOCs, and that they offer a wealth of possibilities to libraries in their efforts to serve their communities and stay relevant in the 21st century. I want to share what I learned from my experience in organizing and running a MOOC and share my thoughts about what I see as other possibilities for public libraries, and then get your input at the end. I just want to say at the outset that my perspective is very different from those of academic librarians. And I know there's been much discussion recently about the future of MOOCs, with sentiment going from the year of the MOOC in 2012 to skepticism about their future in 2013. I recently listened remotely to the OCLC symposium at ALA Midwinter called The Hope and Hype of MOOCs, and I understand the conflicting perspectives about their role in academia. But based on my experiences and from the perspective of the lifelong learning possibilities they offer for all ages in the public library, my perspective is markedly one of hope. And I can't wait to do another one at my library. Just a little bit about the Ridgefield Library. It's located in Ridgefield, Connecticut in Fairfield County, and it's about 60 miles north of New York City. The town has a population of about 24,000, And actually, since September 2012, we've been in a 10,000 square foot interim space. So the MOOC was actually held in our program room in that temporary space. The picture I have here of the library is actually our new library, which is scheduled to open in the spring of this year, and we're very excited about that. We offer a wide range of programs for all ages, and we're lucky enough to have a dedicated adult program director, and we have an administration that is totally open to ideas from the staff about new endeavors. So why a MOOC at the library? Since seeing an article in the New York Times in August of 2011 about the first course taught by Sebastian Thrun and Peter Norvig on artificial intelligence at Stanford, I was intrigued with the idea of courses open to anyone who had access to the Internet. Over the last few years, I've closely followed the emergence of Coursera, edX, and Udacity, the MOOC providers, and signed up and taken a few courses myself. So what made me want to do one at the library? Lifelong learning is a part of our mission statement, and we have a history of offering programs that made me fairly certain that a MOOC would be a good fit. Over the years, we've had a number of what we call scholarly programs in which we've offered multi-part offerings devoted to a particular works of literature. For these, we brought in an associate dean from Yale to lecture about literary works in conjunction with hosting book discussions, movie screenings, and other related programming organized and run by our staff. These have included explorations of Don Quixote, the dramas of Shakespeare, James Joyce's Ulysses, and plays by Eugene O'Neill, who actually at one point lived in Ridgefield. These programs were very successful with good attendance, so I was fairly certain that if I could find the right MOOC, it would be well received. Keeping ourselves relevant in the 21st century was one of our goals. The other reason that made me decide to do a MOOC was based on my own personal experiences. The first MOOC I ever took was an intro to computer programming, and I needed a group to help me with the material. It was just all new to me. I was unable to find anyone in the area, and Coursera, this is a screen capture of their page. On all their courses, they have a link to join a meetup. And so I tried to find one in my area, couldn't find one. And I even looked in New York City because it's not that far away from me. And I noticed that even for people who were trying to organize and post meetups, they would suggest a location like a Starbucks or something like that. They had a hard time kind of coordinating with people and getting it to work. And I thought, goodness, the library would be the perfect place for that. So this is an interesting article. These were some statistics from an article that was in the New Republic in December. And it's based on a survey that was taken by the University of Pennsylvania of 35,000 people who had signed up for one of their MOOCs. And the criteria was that everyone they surveyed had completed at least one lecture in the MOOC. And I thought the results of this survey were really interesting in terms, again, of how it applies to public libraries. Half of the people who took the MOOC said they were doing it for fun or curiosity. 37% were between 35 and 51 years of age, and then 39% were over the age of 50. 44% were looking for skills to help them better in their job. 14% were retired. 6.6% unemployed. So I thought that, you know, this is a population that we serve at the public library. These are the kind of people, you know, that come to us and either want help in job training or just lifelong learning. So when I decided to do this, I looked at what I consider right now the big three in MOOC providers. And again, there are many others, and I've listed at the bottom of this slide, there are some aggregators now of MOOC courses. So they will give you a list of all the MOOCs that are available from all the different people who are now creating them. But I focused on these big three. And each of these providers have different structures, affiliation with different academic institutions, and offer a range of courses. And I began searching their catalogs in the fall of 2012, searching for a course that I would hoped would work with my experiment. Of these three, Coursera currently has the largest offering of courses and is affiliated with the most academic institutions. The last I checked, Coursera was affiliated with over 90 academic institutions throughout the world, edX with over 30. Udacity's model is slightly different and partners with both academic and corporate entities. edX is nonprofit, while Coursera and Udacity are actually for-profit educational technology companies. If you look at the offerings of these providers, the majority are science and technology oriented. But because of the limitations we had in our interim space, I was looking for what I will call a low-tech course, something that did not require the use of individual computer terminals for the participants, so something in the liberal arts. I was excited when I saw Professor Weinstein's course listed, and I realized that it was scheduled to begin in June of 2013, and that it would be the perfect centerpiece for our summer reading program. And if you are a public library considering incorporating a MOOC, I encourage you to look at all the offerings out there and do it far in advance, because it did take me a while, as I will describe, to get this organized. So this is just a screen capture of a page from Coursera where I basically restricted, you can see all the categories of courses they offer here, very heavily weighted toward science and technology and computer. But here's what came up, and they will list them in the order of the most recent going ahead, and they usually list courses well in advance, months in advance. Right now, there are courses listed for the fall of 2014. So how did I decide on the fiction of relationship? Again, when you look at if you click on a course before it starts on Coursera, there'll be a page of information. Advanced information for these courses will typically give the scope of the course, any recommended prerequisites, which is more applicable again to a computer course or a science course, estimated weekly time commitment, and an introductory video. This is a standard for most of the courses that are listed. This course included a list of the authors and readings to be covered for 10 weeks. It was a 10-week course. And there is a little introductory video. I can't really show it to you now, but this is a little screen capture of Professor Weinstein. And I found his video very compelling. It really seemed like it would be a good fit for our library. Now, since this is a relatively new form of learning, the format for video lectures and the quality of the production can vary, and I knew this from courses I had taken myself. And the actual lectures for a course are not released until the start date of the course. So while this course looked like the perfect fit, and I was pretty sure it would be, and to some degree it was a leap of faith, because I was basing a 10-week program and setting it up on something that I basically had seen one page of information and a 3-minute video about. But I needed to schedule and put the mechanism for the entire 10-week course in place prior to watching any of the full lectures. And now I'd just like to take a little survey about how many of you, what types of libraries everyone listening today is from. And I'll just give you a little time to take the poll. Okay, and I guess we can continue now with the slides. All right. Okay, so once I decided on this course, I knew there were issues I was going to have to deal with, and I wanted to see what I was trying to think ahead of what the potential problems might be. One of them related to computer issues. I knew there were going to be issues with that in our space. There were issues about whether we would be auditing this course or trying to take it for some kind of a certificate. But the first thing I needed to deal with was permissions. After we hoped to become a meetup for the course, I initiated the process of contacting Coursera to make sure that we were within their parameters for course usage. There was no phone number listed on their webpage, so I contacted Coursera through email addresses listed on their contact page. I have 2 addresses listed here. These are the 2 I actually tried. I gave a detailed description of exactly what I intended to do, how the course would be structured, how I would have people sign up on Coursera's website. It took 2 emails and a number of weeks to get a response from, and even then it was from their feedback department. There was no one that I could actually communicate with. But they did say that it was fine to go ahead and do it and gave me an example of a community center that had done something similar. So my advice is that if you want to send a request to use one of their courses, do so far in advance of your anticipated start date. I did try to contact both Coursera and edX to get some input from them about how they feel about how libraries use MOOCs, and I will talk about that at the end. I did get some response. So I want to make it clear that before you use one of their courses, you should contact them for permission. So the first set of issues I knew I would have to deal with was computer access. Everyone had to sign up on the Coursera website, and I knew there were and then we had our patrons sign up on our own website or register with us. In addition, I knew that a lot of patrons did not have a computer at home, or they perhaps did not have internet access. So we made it clear that they could come to the library to register on Coursera. I also made it clear from the outset that if patrons who did not have access to home computers and missed one of our weekly meetups, because we were going to be meeting once a week for 10 weeks, that they could use one of our public computers to catch up on what they missed. Once a course starts and the material for each week is released, it's available to anyone who has signed up for the course to either stream or download. And actually, this is what I did in our interim space. I was able to download the lectures. And lastly, in our interim space, our broadband connection was not adequate for any streaming content. So as I mentioned, luckily with Coursera lectures, there's the option to download the video files. Then there was the issue of whether we were going to be taking the course for a certificate. For this course, as with many other MOOCs, there's the option to get a certificate of completion at the end of the course. This aspect has been expanding with Coursera offering different types of certificates, but I'm not really going to get into that now. But for the fiction of relationship, getting a certificate of completion would have involved writing 500-word papers each week that would be peer-reviewed by other people in the course. In math and science MOOCs, there's usually assignments, but those are computer-generated and computer-graded, so it's a different kind of setup, and so you can get instantaneous feedback. But with a course like this, where thousands of people register, certainly the people who are offering it can't be expected to read all the papers. But we made it clear to our participants that we were going to be starting 1 week behind the actual class schedule. So we started a week after Professor Weinstein actually started his lectures, and that we would be auditing the course. But we let them know that if they wanted to pursue a certificate, it certainly was an option for them. Then we needed to promote the MOOC. I was determined to make this program work, and luckily, as I mentioned, we have a great adult program staff who put together this flyer. In addition to having printed flyers and promoting the program on our website, and we also did so through the usual channels in our local press, I also run a monthly program called Tech Fridays that focuses on a tech topic of interest each month. And in the early spring, I did a program on an introduction to MOOCs, describing how they worked and the options that were available out there for our patrons. My intention was twofold: to entice our patrons for the meetup that I knew we would be offering, but also to let them know of this fabulous tool for lifelong learning that they could also pursue on their own. To promote the MOOC, I also made personal plugs for it at some of our other programs, including our 5 ongoing book discussion groups at the library. And since this was a part of our adult summer reading program, we did receive support from the Friends of the Ridgefield Library, but there was actually very little cost involved aside from staff time and some promotional materials. By the time the MOOC started, slightly over 40 people had signed up, which was actually more than I had hoped for. And it was the middle of the summer, and as you can see from this flyer, this is not light reading, beach reading for the summer necessarily. So the next thing, we wanted to make sure people had access to the reading materials. And I know that that is an issue, again, for people taking courses and for academic libraries and finding ways to provide the readings for people who sign up. We're lucky as a public library that we have access to interlibrary loan. And so I was able to get all the titles here. These are the readings for the 10 weeks through interlibrary loan. I made up a schedule for our interlibrary loan person so that we got the books a couple of weeks in advance of when we would actually be having the meeting to watch the lectures. And the ones in the first five that I've put in blue here, those were actually all available as free ebooks online through Project Gutenberg for those who had e-readers and were interested in reading it that way. And this worked out really well, that everybody was able to get the reading material in plenty of time before the lectures. And then there was one other aspect to deal with. For the big 3 providers, the video lectures for MOOCs tend to be divided into short segments averaging 10 to 12 minutes. And Anand Agarwal, the president of edX, has talked about the reasoning behind these shorter segments. First, it has to do with our attention span. In a typical college lecture lasting from 1 to 2 hours, no matter how interested we are, it's hard to stay focused at the same level for that period of time. Listening to these lectures in shorter segments allows a participant to absorb the material at their own pace. In addition, for many computer, math, and science courses, concepts build upon each other. And if you haven't mastered a concept before the professor introduces the next one, it's easy to get lost. By having these shorter segments, you make sure you've mastered one concept before going on to the next. But since we were only meeting once a week, I took the risk of showing a whole week's worth of lectures together, more like a traditional college class. Obviously, this isn't as much of an issue in a literature course, but still, we were watching 2 to 2.5 hours of lectures each evening, and probably that's, I would consider, one of the things that wasn't ideal. And as I said, I was looking for a low-tech setup. We are in this interim space, and really this is the way it looked in our program room. I had a laptop hooked up to a projector, and I projected the the lectures on the wall of our library's program room. Here's just another picture. I've used various methods of mirroring a screen, but in this case it was as low-tech as it could get. As I mentioned previously, our broadband connection in our temporary space isn't fast enough for streaming, so I downloaded the content prior to our meetings so I wouldn't experience buffering issues. This picture captures the setting in which Professor Weinstein gave his lectures. The setting never varied and there were no other audio-visual elements. It was Professor Weinstein standing at a lectern in this room. When I had watched the intro video, there had been graphic elements. And when I saw the first series of videos a few days before our first session, I have to admit I was a little apprehensive. This turned out to be totally unfounded. Professor Weinstein was such a compelling lecturer that we were all totally engrossed for 2 to 2.5 hours each week. We were in awe. I watched the lectures twice, once before our meeting to prepare and then during the sessions, and I was engaged the second time as I was the first. So just to give you an idea of what we listened to each week, this is a screen capture of the page for the course, and you can see this is the second week of lectures for Men on Let's Go, which was a book written in the 1740s. Listening to all these components accounted for over 2 hours of listening. But as you can see, the longest segments were 13 minutes. The average week had about 10 segments. This particular course also offered videos of Professor Weinstein's class discussions in a seminar format with his students, and you can see these at the bottom of that screen. We didn't listen to them as a group because that would have added another hour to our listening, but they were available to participants, and in fact a number of them did sample these on their own as I did, and they were a value-added feature. This also shows you a typical Coursera page, and I've talked about some of these elements before, but I want to point out the discussion forums on the left there. Considering this course had what I think was between 30 and 40,000 students signed up, there were many threads available on this discussion forum. This is another feature that many of us took advantage of, and we all found that this gave us new insights with opinions and threads started from people all over the world. It also gives you an idea of the goals people have in taking these courses. Sometimes you'll see just people actually start talking about personal issues that the lectures bring up, but it's just a fascinating thing to look at if you're taking one of these courses and to contribute to. You will also see that there's a Join a Meetup tab on the bottom, the feature I mentioned earlier, and I did list our weekly meetings on this. And so we met for 10 weeks, and the elements we had, we met on 10 Wednesday evenings from the middle of June through mid-August. We started meeting at 7 p.m. after the rest of the library was closed to the public, but after 2 weeks we moved back our starting time to 6:30 due to the length of our sessions. Even so, we usually didn't end till 9 or 9:30, depended how animated our discussions were, and they were animated, and often we just had to cut them off because it was getting so late. The elements that were constant were refreshments, because I decided that if I was going to ask people in the middle of the summer to come and spend this time, we needed to give them some food, our listening to the discussions, and then moderated discussions led by a facilitator. I facilitated 4 of the discussions and recruited other facilitators, including our assistant director, a college librarian who lives in our community, and a patron who had a particular love of Melville and led the discussion related to his works. Again, all our facilitators had the opportunity to watch the lectures in advance, and discussions were based on the content of Professor Weinstein's wonderful, wonderful lectures, and I can't emphasize that enough. So who were our participants? So as I mentioned, we started out with about 40 people, but as I anticipated, that did drop off fairly rapidly. But we did have 20 participants that made it through the 10 weeks. Some had taken vacations during the program, but actually watched the lectures on their own personal devices while they were away. I was very impressed by that. Honestly, this was much more than I had hoped for. I had joked with our staff that it might just be me and the professor at the end of the 10 weeks, but was thrilled that wasn't the case. Since one of the issues with MOOCs is that people don't complete them, we were happy with our retention rate. The majority of the participants were women, but it was a co-ed group and the age range was from the 30s through the 80s. For the session on Borges, we even had a college student who was attracted by the topic. He had wanted to take a course on Borges at his institution, but you needed to speak fluent Spanish in order to do so, and he did not. So he was really happy to have the opportunity to come and talk about Borges with us, and that was a particularly wonderful night. We had a great discussion. I myself suffered withdrawal pains from both Professor Weinstein and the participants when it was over, and we were all very sad to see it end. I really couldn't believe how fortunate we were to have found access to this incredible course. So when we were done, we wanted to get people's feedback about what they thought about doing this at the library and whether they felt it was something they would want to do again or that we should do again. So we put together a survey. I gave out paper surveys to people the last night of our course, our session. But we also had the email addresses for all the other people who had signed up. So we also mailed out the survey through Constant Contact. And we asked questions about the level of participation people had, and most importantly to us, if taking the course at the library added to their experience. We also wanted to know if they hadn't finished, why they hadn't finished, and if they would be interested in taking another MOOC at the library, and if so, what subject areas they would be interested in. We also asked for any other comments they wished to share. We received 18 responses to our survey, and I'll share some of the results with you. In terms of the level of participation, the people who attended most of the sessions, most of them did most of the reading. Some said they did some of the reading. No one said they started at the library and finished at home, which I was actually sort of surprised about. There were 4 people who decided not to finish the course who answered the survey, and these were, not surprisingly, because of the time commitment and because of the level of the reading. And then one person went on vacation in the middle of and wasn't able to finish. Then we wanted to know, this was really important to us, did attending the sessions at the library enrich your experience? And this was very gratifying to us. Almost everyone said it did. And this, again, was something we were, curious about. Was this something worth doing? One person said not really, and other people, there were 2 people who actually didn't complete because, again, for other reasons. And I'm sorry if you can hear my phone in the background. I'm sorry I'm doing this from home. Would you take another MOOC at the library? This was the one that was most important to us. And again, everyone who completed the survey, even the people who did not finish the course, said yes. This was really, really gratifying. And also, I thought that people might say they would take it only if we modified the sessions that were so long, but no one even checked that box. So that was really a wonderful result of the survey. And then we asked them what subject areas they would be interested in. And certainly, not surprisingly, most of them picked literature. I mean, this was sort of a self-selected group. They had all signed up for a literature group. But here are the other topics they said they would be interested in: history, philosophy, that makes sense. And then some did say computer, science and technology, and a few others gave some other suggestions. And then these were some of the comments they made. The good that they found that other participants enriched their understanding. It gave them a chance to share opinions, which we certainly did. The discussion helped me improve my analysis of the work because we had input from so many different ages of people, and men and women. We all had different perspectives. It really did often change our view of what we had read. They would not have watched the lectures on their own. They wouldn't have probably completed it. Well worth it. And my favorite comment, it was pretty perfect. How to improve, shorten the sessions, which certainly that isn't a surprise. I mean, that's something I kind of struggled with myself when I think about doing this again. 10 weeks was a long haul, and they would have liked more time in between sessions for the reading. It was a fairly significant reading load, and that can be, again, very different for different courses depending on the type of course you're taking and the person, who is giving the course. So, but this one did have a significant amount of reading. So, the road ahead. So based on my experiences last summer, I'm eager to present another MOOC at the library. In our new library, we'll be lucky enough to have a technology lab that will offer the possibility of delving into the wealth of computer, technology, and science courses that are offered by the various MOOC providers. Obviously, each library and each community's needs are different. But the common thread that I see here is that for many communities, libraries are the main source of their access to computers and the internet, and therefore could also be their place to take MOOCs. Obviously, staff time is another issue, and I am currently talking to some people in our community who have computer expertise and might be willing to be facilitators for MOOCs related to some technology topics that I hope we can do in the future. So I'd like to share some of my thoughts with you and on how I see the road ahead, and then open up this discussion to all of you. And I love this quote from Albert Einstein: "Once you stop learning, you start dying." This is an interesting article by Michael Roth, who is the president of Wesleyan University in Connecticut. And I include it here because I think some of his insights support why offering MOOCs in libraries makes sense. Although he had some skepticism about the value of MOOCs, he agreed to teach one called The Modern and the Postmodern for Coursera after Wesleyan University decided to partner with Coursera. I actually took this course. Based on his experience, he has come to see them not as a way to replace the campus experience, but as he says, to expand the framework within which to think about it. He has also come to believe that the issue of non-completion of a course is not necessarily a reflection of its relevance. I put up 2 quotes from him, which I actually love. And again, he talks about in this article how the diversity of people who took the course and who participated through the discussion boards online, including older students, retired teachers, another student enrolled with his mother so that they could discuss the material together and have a bond that way. Again, his observations parallel my own, that there's a hunger to learn out there. And even if people just take part of a course, they are continuing on the path of lifelong learnings that libraries try to serve. And again, academic institutions may have a very different perspective on that. Recently, I used the information some information I learned in Professor Roth's course. There was a unit on Madame Bovary, a discussion. And I recently did a book group where we discussed Madame Bovary, and the material I learned in this course really helped me made the book discussion a much better one than I think it would have been otherwise. And I think, if anything, running this MOOC at the library has made me even more passionate about the possibilities for the relationship between MOOCs and public libraries. I've started exploring our next steps. Again, because of our impending move to our new library, I've had to postpone offering one again this semester. But here are some of the ways I think library can use MOOCs. Again, these are all ideas that are forms of lifelong learning. Partnering with local schools. If students don't have access to AP courses available to them, the library could be a place that assists them in taking MOOCs that might expose them to this course content. This could be structured in different ways depending on the library's resources, from offering computer use to setting up something more like a learning hub. Computer and programming skills. Since so many MOOCs are available on this topic, using a MOOC to help patrons learn computer programming or other essential skills for job training. Again, this could just be providing a space where they can meet and collaborate, or offering a facilitator with them doing the work on their own. Pick a MOOC and do a hybrid. Patrons watch the lectures on their own, but then have a meetup to discuss or help each other understand critical concepts. And that's something that actually one of the people in my little survey recommended. So that might be something I would consider. And here's one that I'd like to do. And if anybody listening is interested in this and would want to contact me about this, I'd love to talk to them. I would love for 2 libraries in either different parts of the country, or perhaps even in 2 different countries, to host a MOOC at their library and then watch the material together, and then meet other people online in another library via Skype or some similar service to have discussions about the material. If anybody might be interested in doing that, my contact information is at the end. I'd love to talk to you. So I did reach out to both Coursera and edX to see if I could get some input for them for this webinar. And while I was unable to talk to anyone, I did get some email responses. Both expressed enthusiasm about public libraries. edX, which is based in Boston, is in the middle of a pilot program called Boston X, and the person from edX sent me a press release about this. I'm just going to read you what this says. It says, edX, the not-for-profit online learning initiative founded by Harvard University and MIT, announced a pilot project with the city of Boston, MIT, and Harvard to make online courses available through internet-connected Boston neighborhood community centers, high schools, and libraries. A first-of-its-kind project, Boston X brings together innovators from the nation's center of higher education to offer Boston residents access to courses, internships, job training, and placement services and locations for edX students to gather, socialize, and deepen learning. We must connect adults and youth in our neighborhoods with the opportunities of the knowledge economy. Boston X will help update our neighbors' skills and our community centers, says Tom Marino, the mayor. As a first step, I'm pleased to announce a pilot with Harvard, MIT, and edX, their online learning initiative that will bring free courses and training to our community centers. And then the person from edX sent me a link to one that they had actually sponsored at a community center. For Coursera, I was unable to actually communicate with someone directly, but someone I know who had a contact, sent questions for me, and so they sent me the response they got. And that person said that it sounds that I wanted some insight on how we, Coursera, view public libraries as meetup destinations for MOOCs. And it says, we are very, and very is in italics, enthusiastic about this. And he suggested that I look on their website at something they have called a Learning Hubs Initiative, which I put a screen capture of it here, and I have the URL for it. This Learning Hub, this is what they say about their Learning Hub. It will offer people around the world physical spaces where they can access the internet to take a Coursera course while learning alongside peers in an interactive, facilitated setting, all for free. Essential to this initiative are our new and future partners, international and local organizations who share our vision and can provide on-the-ground support by offering a physical space for learning, reliable internet access, and local course facilitators. And if you go to their website, you can get more information about this program. Again, I don't advocate using a MOOC at your library without contacting the MOOC provider with your intentions. So, please do so if you're considering doing this. My next page is just some resources I have here. Oops. These are just some resources and then my contact information. And again, I would be happy if you contacted me with any questions you think of later, or if you just want to, any way I can help you or any more information. Again, I am really enthusiastic about this, and I would just love to talk to anybody who was interested. And now I'll turn it over to you for your questions and input.
Thank you, Dorothy, for that very stimulating presentation. We will now open the webinar to questions. I have a few to get us started. I gather from your enthusiasm about this and from the slides that you showed what you plan to do next, you do intend to do another MOOC. What will the subject of that MOOC be, and why did you select that subject?
Well, as I said, we're moving into our technology, our new library in the spring, and for the first time we will have a technology lab. So I'm really hoping to do some kind of computer course. Right now we have a program that someone in the town has funded on promoting science for girls. And we have a woman who's actually helping teach Scratch, which is coding, introduction to coding for middle schoolers. And I've been talking to her about possibly doing something with the MOOC in computer programming for adults. So I'm not sure that's going to happen, but that's one of the things I'm thinking about. But I also would like to do another one in the humanities, because we do have a lot of people in our community who are really interested in that. The problem is right now finding one that works for timing. There's some listed for the fall. There's, I'm sure, a lot more coming, but I've seen some on art or some history ones that I'd like to do. I'd love to do another literature one, but again, there are a lot less of those right now from the MOOC providers, but I think they're starting to be more. So actually, I'd love to do this modern and the postmodern one if it's offered again. It's been offered twice so far. I'm hoping it'll be offered again at a time when I'd be able to do it. So.
And how would you change the format of your MOOC meetings based on what you learned from this experience?
Yeah, and that is something I would really ponder. The sessions were really long, and again, we were really lucky that Professor Weinstein was a totally compelling lecturer. But it is a lot to ask of people. So some of the things I've thought about, and again, I guess I would have to see what the structure of the course was. So if I was going to do another more liberal arts course, perhaps I would break it up so that we met twice a week, if people would be willing to do that. Perhaps I would have them watch some of the lectures at home, or again, if they didn't have computer access, come to the library. to do so, and then just meet for facilitated discussions, or maybe some hybrid of both those things together. That's kind of what I've thought of, although if anyone else had any ideas, I'd love to hear them.
Here's a question from an audience member. Did any of the participants indicate that they do not know how to use a computer or didn't have easy access, but were able to participate in the MOOC because of your program?
Yes, definitely. Because as I said, we did have some older people, not that older people necessarily don't know how to use a computer, but yes, we did have one or two people who didn't have a computer at home and came to the library, and we signed them up on one of our computers on the Coursera website. They came to all the sessions, so they didn't need to then watch the lectures on our computers, but we certainly made that offer to them that if they were unable to make one of the sessions and wanted to make it up, they could come and watch the lectures in our facility.
Cool. And just to kind of reiterate another question, does the library pay a fee to Coursera to offer this course, and then do the attendees pay a fee to anybody?
The attendees did not pay any fees, no. As I said, our summer reading program does get support from the Friends of the Library, but again, there were almost no costs associated with this program. And no, again, I did send an email to Coursera. I outlined in detail exactly what we were going to do, how we were organizing it, and they just said go ahead. So there was no mention of any fee from them. Again, I think their model supports that, but I can't speak for Coursera. So as I said, if you're thinking of doing this, I would definitely say you need to contact Coursera just to make sure they're on board with this. So.
Did your participants have to be a Ridgefield Library registered borrower to sign up, or could anybody, maybe say in a nearby community, could anybody else sign up for this MOOC at Ridgefield?
No, we didn't restrict it to people in our community. We often have people from other communities come to our programs. There are some smaller libraries in our area that aren't able to offer as many programs as we are, so we have regularly have people from other communities come to our program, and that was the case in this one. And we wanted to encourage that. We wanted this to be open to the community and available to as many people as were interested in it.
Truly open course.
Yeah, and a lot of people had never heard of MOOCs before this also. And, because I was so excited about MOOCs, I kind of thought, gee, everybody knows about them. But when I did that Tech Friday, most of the people who came had never heard of a MOOC. So I was glad to be even able to, let people know about them, because there's just so much out there that's available to take.
Now I have another question. What sort of time commitment did it take for you to do this library, and what sort of time commitment did it take for other library staff in order to be able to present this program through your library?
I would say most of the time commitment was on my part, only because this was my idea and it was something I was really passionate about. I mean, not that someone else wouldn't have helped me, but I was the one who spent probably most of the time getting everything together, but obviously I needed to depend on other people. So our programming people put together that flyer. We worked on it together. The person who got the books for me for interlibrary loans spent a number of hours organizing that, sending out all the requests for interlibrary loans. And then our assistant director did volunteer to be the facilitator for a couple of the lectures, so she spent some time. But I did spend a lot of time. I did all the reading, so the reading took me a couple of hours a week by itself. And then when I facilitated the sessions, I tried to prepare. I watched all the lectures ahead of time, so that was 2.5 hours right there, just every week. I watched them before we had the program because I wanted to know what was in them before we showed them at the library. So it was a time commitment, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be that kind of a time commitment. For, you could arrange it a different way, break it up differently, have more than one person, be responsible for different weeks. And if it was a computer course or something like that, it would be a different kind of input you would have to have in it. So I think it could vary. Again, because this was something new I was doing and I was really excited about it, I probably spent more time than, honestly, I probably needed to, but it was something I wanted to make sure that, it went off well.
Now, you offered this as part of your regular, so to speak, your regular summer reading program. Do you think that summer was a good time to do it, or would you recommend that libraries try different times to offer MOOCs?
Yeah, I would say different times. I mean, it just so happened I had been looking for a course like this, and again, we were in our interim space, and I was really excited because I thought that the topic of this course would really resonate with our patrons. But obviously, the summer isn't always an ideal time because, if you do have a summer reading program in your library, it's probably a really busy time already in a public library. And then people do go on vacation, and, so yes, I think probably, doing it in kind of a fall semester or a spring semester probably would be a better way to start. It just, for a number of reasons, wound up this way, that we did it in the summer. But as I say, it actually wound up being fine in the summer. So I think it would depend on your community also.
I do not see any further questions. If there are any further questions, you may send them to Dorothy or to Alex, and we will attempt to get them answered. Are there any others? I think we have time for one more. Okay. Then I want to thank you, Dorothy, for this very enlightening and really inspiring webinar. And thank you, Iping Chen Gaffey and Aaron Boyd, for your technical support. I want to thank you, attendees, for participating in our efforts to extend libraries' contributions to lifelong learning in the evolving digital world. I especially want to thank you for your tolerance of my having a little problem with my screen earlier. But as you can see now, we hope that you will take a minute to complete the survey when it comes, and you can see how many more wonderful events we have scheduled. Your answers to our survey will help us plan future continuing education offerings. We try to target to the interests that our participants describe. And we hope to see you at other ALCTS webinars, perhaps on a topic you have suggested, or to see your participation in an e-forum or a web course. Again, thank you very much for participating in today's webinar on MOOCs, Massive Open Online Courses, and have a good afternoon.